Welcome, everybody. Glad you're all here. And to start,
I did make a selection from Emmett Fox, and so I'm from using the Emmett Fox book called "Make Your Life Worthwhile," and I'm going to read the section on realization is the key. There is a big difference between what you really believe and what you think you ought to believe or what you want to believe. You demonstrate what you really believe. The other ideas do not demonstrate. If someday you do come to believe them, they will then demonstrate or come into effect in your life, but not before. It is not much use saying that you know that a thing will not hurt you if you only know it intellectually. If you realize, even slightly, that it cannot hurt you, the case is different. But just saying in a perfunctory way that a thing cannot hurt you is not enough. It is not enough to say that you will be all right unless you believe in it. It is not enough to say that God will take care of you, or in this case, getting God to say yes, unless you realize and believe what you are saying to at least a small degree. The sole object of spiritual treatment is to increase your realization of the truth, which you already accept, namely that God can and will protect you from all harm, and that fear and error have no power when you yourself do not give it to them. Quotation, nothing shall by any means hurt you. Luke 10:19.
That was a perfect thing to read. Would you read the very beginning again? About the distance between what we think we believe and what we do believe.
Yes, there's a big difference between what you really believe and what you think you ought to believe, or what you want to believe. You demonstrate what you really believe.
Right.
Other ideas do not demonstrate. In other words, your life, that as you exist in your day-to-day life, is set by your true beliefs.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Everything that I ever talk about, it doesn't matter what the topic is, but it's always about going for the truth and having our conscious practice and our conscious awareness of the divine and the human and our human experience come into the here and now. I love practical spirituality. I love to hear things like God is here, God is now, God is, God in me, as me, is me. That's great, but I want to experience it and I want to help other people experience that as well. The reason is because I want our quality of life increased ASAP through a better quality of relationship with our divine self, with our true self. And it has to be done according to what each person has as their spiritual path. But there are truths, what I call truths, with a capital T. We have truths that work for us, but then we have capital T truths that are just true for all of us, no matter what path we're on. So I want to talk to you about God and God saying yes. And we're going to do it a little bit as almost like a little bit of a workshop. So if you have a piece of paper to write on or something like that, I will be inviting you to just write down some answers to things for yourself. They're not for me. I'm never going to see them. Hey, Mark. So first, I'm going to ask you to look at three different sort of aspects. And here we go. Have you ever tried to get God to say yes to something you wanted. I mean, who hasn't tried that at some point in their life, right? I mean, that's the kind of prayer we were raised with. Dear God, please give me a bicycle. Dear God, please bring me the love of my life. Dear God, right? Please, please, please. Also, have you ever thought to yourself, well, if I do this spiritual thing right, you know, if I pray right, or I'm a good enough person, that then I'll get more of God's love and more of God's blessing? I mean, that definitely kind of comes into our consciousness. Again, this is the culture that we're in. It's the kind of training that we either still have, or we're working through, or we're not maybe even aware that we're doing. And have you ever done this thing? I mean, I've done all these things, so I'm just, whatever I'm sharing, I've either done it or I'm working through it. When you asked God for something and God didn't seem to say yes, have you calmed yourself by putting meaning to it? Like, there's a young woman I met yesterday at the Earth Day fair. And she said, yes, I had to live in my car for a week. And God did that because that was the only way God could get me to slow down. And whenever anybody says to me, well, God did this because of this, or God made that happen because, I always think, did God email you? Because if God emailed you, I want the address. Like, and I don't mean to be disrespectful. There is a place for everything in this world. There is a place for every part of this journey, and that is one step of the journey. I would like to suggest it's not the only step. Okay. So there are so many meanings that we put into these situations. And anytime we do that, and anytime we say, wow, you know, God made sure I didn't get that job because something better is going to come. Or God made sure that, like she said, I was in my car and it was because it was the only way God could get to slow me down. Anytime we do that, we, in the back of our mind somewhere, in our subconscious or in our unexplored areas of our psyche, we are making assumptions. We're making assumptions that make us feel better. Of course, we want to feel better. So we're going to talk about, I'll bring that concept of assumptions back in just a second, but that's number one of the three things I'd like to ask you to think about for yourself. The second question I have kind of relates to the first one in that it starts the same. Have you ever thought, if you had this stuff down, I pray right, I live right, I eat right, I think right, I do, you know, like I'm working on this. I'm working on being more forgiving, being kinder, you know, all of that stuff. Have you ever thought about it? Like, if I just did it right, it would be like in school where I get to level up. I get to go to the next grade. I would be deserving of grace. If I were just like Jesus, if I were just like just like Mother Mary, if I were just like St. Francis, then I'd be worthy, or then I would receive. These are things just to get you to think, how am I thinking about these things? Because how we think about things is different from how we actually live them very often. And I want to propose that that's the spiritual path. Bringing those into one is the spiritual path. Here's the third question. How do you see God? Now, I think that we see God as just a human culture. I think we see God as a parent on steroids. I think we see God as like the father we wish we had, but even better, or the mother we wish we had, but even better. And we get a lot of juice out of that sense of being held, protected, looked after. That's great. The problem is there's a dark side of the moon around that. And the dark side is that we are thinking that God operates on a very human, social sort of layer with all of our human rules. So then we get stuck in things like, I'm not worthy, I don't deserve, or I feel shameful. And I remember one time I had done something that I felt so shamed about from within. Nobody shamed me externally. I did it all. And I was with my guru, Amachi. She walks into the room, and it was a house. It was back before there were lots of people. And I fell to my knees. I mean, I went very old school. I was just like, I don't deserve to be in your presence. And I really felt that. And the assumption there is that God is parental in a human way. But if we think about it, the idea that God is withholding permission or love or really anything at all is kind of a weird idea. Again, there are certain places in our lives where we need that ideation for us to grow, for us to feel safe. Life is too complex to give you a set of rules that you have to follow. But I want to add something into whatever your set of beliefs is. Doesn't matter. You don't have to do anything differently. But I want you to add in, I want to offer this as an add-in because it's so powerful, it's so full of light that it will start making the changes that you've been praying for, possibly without answer. And the thing is that God, this is it. God always says yes. Always. That, if you take it literally, I want you to take it literally for a second, because if you're being, I won't put it that way. If just find out what your mind is saying. Because when I heard that the first time, my mind went, oh, I don't think so. Like, really? Like, how is that even, if that's true, if God is always saying yes, where's my money? If God is saying yes, where's the love of my life? If God is always saying yes, where's my physical, emotional health? Where's my betterment? And if I get far enough down that rabbit hole, then I get into, why doesn't God love me? Because I'm thinking, in that mentality, I'm thinking, as a parental figure, God's supposed to reward me, right? But that's not how it works. It's not how it works. So we set ourselves up for a specific type of relationship with God by not exploring our assumptions. And so this phrase, God the Father, makes me think of my father. Like my earthly father. He wasn't perfect. He was a guy. He was a man. He was a human. So, but I still, if I go traditional, I'm still thinking of, if I'm a really good person, God's going to reward me, right? But if I look around the world and I see that there are lots of people who have no compassion, no spirituality to speak of, lots of cruelty, and yet they still have all the toys, the money, the houses, the things that we tend to want. So there's something going on here that means the old rules are not fitting what we need to do now, especially in this time in our human history where we have got to get a move on. We've got to stop doing whatever it is we've been doing and come to a different place in what we're doing. So where we're playing by earthly and social rules and thinking that God's doing the same thing, God is actually playing by different rules. God's playing by yes rules. And those are very, very different. Those are very different. So I want to ask you, what if God were not that kind of father? What would God be? And how would we be able to align with that yes? What if prayer, while being everything we already do, no change necessary? What if prayer were not really for permission in the end result, but to connect and to allow God's yes to resonate through your moments, your days, your weeks, your months, your life? What if we did exactly what we're already doing, but we add in an assumption that there's more there. So let me explain it like this. We've got the cross. I love the cross because it has so much symbolism. It just, you could write books till you die and you'd not be done. So let's look at the cross for a second. Cross has this going this way, which is, to me, is like time. I'm marching forward and I'm trying to get things done. This is the God's yes. This is constant. This is with us. So if we're, I wish I had a third hand. If we're at the center of that, or close to the center of that, we're getting to that God's yes. We're starting to see things a little differently. If we are too busy focusing here that we can't see the rest, we're saying God is going to either reward me or punish me. And we're not seeing that God is already giving. So the actual journey is not this way, it's this way. We're going to miss it. So how the heck do we do that? Well, I noticed some time ago that what I was doing was I was yelling at God. God can take it, by the way. I was yelling at God and like, oh my God, like, how is this even happening? Why is this happening to me? And I realized I was stuck at an emotional place of, why don't you love me? Why, what do I have to do to get you to give me what I want? I'm doing everything I can possibly think to do. I'm meditating, I'm praying, I think spirituality, I breathe it, eat it every freaking day. I'm like, what do I have to do? And one day I came to that realization and something popped in. And the something that popped in was curiosity. Curiosity. I wonder if there's something else involved here that I'm not seeing. My beautiful guru Amachi says that God is like the sun, just shining constantly on the good, the evil, the grays, the blacks, the whites, of truth, of everything. God has no preference. God just says yes. That sent me on quite a journey. Because what Bob was talking about, yes, I believe things like God in me, as me, is me. That touches me. That God in me, as me, is me. That takes so much assumed distance away between me and the divine. Instead, we're both right. We are one. We are the yin yang symbol. I think that's the spiritual journey. And I think that when we look at the awareness that God is really not the human parent, God is the divine parent, and that is a whole different game. And one that we don't know. I don't know why we keep assuming that we know, but we don't really know. Until we personally experience it, we just don't really know. And thinking about that way gives me a place to do my spiritual seeking that is very, very private, very beautiful, very authentic. I get to do things like yell at God and then go, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm going to burn in hell. I mean, I'm Jewish. Where'd I get that stuff from? Another life. But whatever, I have all this stuff in me, like we all have all this stuff in us. But if we dared to bring in that God's yes in the ways that work for us, and this is an exploration, we bring that in, I'm telling you, the light of that is unbelievably, it's mind-blowingly stronger than any effort we can make. It is stronger than then the darkness, amazingly. So let me give you this. I don't know why this story is coming to mind, but I'm going to tell it to you. It's kind of out there. I had just met Amachi. She's from India. She's like Mother Teresa times a million. And I had met her. I met her in 1988. And she was talking about if you need me, just call for me. Like, just call, because I will be there. And I'm like, neat trick. I like it. That sounds good to me. So it was about 6-8 months after I'd met her. She'd gone back to India, whatever she was doing. It was either a dream or a massive visitation. Felt more like a visitation. Greg could probably tell us, but I think it was a visitation, and it was a very dark figure showed up in my like half awake state. Scared the ever living crap out of me. But before I could even think, what came out of my mouth was "Amma, Amma," and I saw her. This is all inside here, but I saw her appear like a flash of light in her white sari, and that big, dark, tall, nasty, scary energy was just gone. And I came to full consciousness and went, "What happened? What's going on?" A few days later, the dark thing came back a little bit more like half strength, but she was there before I could call for her. The light is so much stronger. Now, do you have to have like a visitation and stuff like that? No, you really don't. You really don't. But you do have to go looking for what is the thing that you resonate with the most. And I will offer this one idea, and then I will leave it there. There's a man named Mike Dooley. And Mike Dooley has this whole little, I'll call it an empire, but it's really not, built on the idea of thoughts become things. I didn't like the idea of thoughts become things because that meant I had to police my head, and I'm not interested. I want to be aware. I want to work better with my mind and my emotions, but I didn't want to have to. I knew that what I was going to do with that was like watch every word, and I was going to drive myself crazy. So I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. So, but I loved, he had like a audio thing out that was brilliant, and it lifted my consciousness, not in a way that took me away from anything. It took me up, not I'm still down here and I'm up here. So it was awesome, but I couldn't maintain it. 20 years go by, and last year in lockdown, I am reintroduced to Mike. Well, Mike has been doing some serious work over 20 years. And so he said, all you have to do is spend 4 or 5 minutes a day and sit with your eyes closed and imagine that you are doing something or being somewhere or whatever that makes you feel freaking fantastic. And he says, but you're not going to visualize it like you're seeing yourself do it, like you're behind you. You're going to be in there doing it. You're going to feel it. And if you're alone in your room and you're going to go, woohoo, and you're going to let yourself have emotion. What a concept. You're going to let yourself be emotional. You're going to let yourself feel freaking fabulous, and set your phone alarm 4 or 5 minutes. So I started doing that 5 days a week, and my life started to change. And what it taught me, like I got an amazing job, challenging, yes. Fascinating, yes. Awesome, probably, yes. I mean, I started pulling more people, and I started attending this church more. I started, like, things started to shift in a way that's very core. And it wasn't because I was begging for anything. It wasn't because I was afraid and trying to avoid something else. It was, I found something that brought the energetic light in, which for me is what works. So I recommend that we take this idea that God has already said yes. There's only yes. And try not to beat ourselves up. Try not to beat ourselves up. but instead use curiosity. Let the little kid of you explore. Since this stuff that we've tried, please, 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 may not have been as successful as we'd like, what else will be? Because God is always saying yes.
Thank you, Lori.
Several of us have mentioned this evening about our spiritual family and how important that to us. And we give thanks to the creator of all that is for our spiritual family and to all the growth and information that we gain and insights that we gain from each other. And so we are truly blessed